Okay, hello everyone online and on site. It's 9:30 here in Bangkok, so we can start. Welcome. This is the session of the core working group at IETF 122. I am Marco Tilocca, my co-chairs are Jaime Jimenez here beside me and Karsten Bormann online. Yeah, as usual, we assume people attending the meeting today to have read the drafts, especially those in the agenda for this meeting. We try to make good use of this time for synchronous discussion, high bandwidth, even if be. Your participation is taken noted automatically. Please do join the session in Miteco to be sure that happens. I'll keep an eye on the chat mostly. We have two note takers, Christian and Ricard. Thank you very much. It's a collective effort. Please do help them taking notes. The link is in the chat. Of course, this is an IETF meeting, so the not well applies. If you are aware of any IPR patents and so on, you are very much supposed to disclose that as soon as possible, or to refrain from participating in the discussion altogether. And most important, keep this professional, be friendly with one another according to our code of conduct. Okay, some practicalities. The meeting is being recorded. If you are attending the meeting here on site, you can conveniently use the lightweight mobile version of Miteco that's recommended. Otherwise, you can still use the full-fledged version on the web interface. In case, keep your audio and video off. If you want to queue for people on site, especially, please queue first on Miteco and then go to the mic. We would like to manage a single queue. If you are inconvenient to speak remotely, well, just type on the chat. We can relay your question. Okay, this is the quite packed agenda for today with no real flex time in the end, so please do your best to stay on time to allow everyone to give their presentation. After this change introduction, we have 3 topics covered by Karsten on the developments and next step of CoreClar, on activities related to the CoreConf document cluster, and on href or CRIs, so the constraint resource identifiers. Then there's going to be Jaime taking over for Bill that couldn't make it for this meeting to present the status of conditional attributes. And Martina will cover a bundle of documents basically related to DNS over co-op. Then Jaime again on the document is driving, pubs up for co-op. Christian with transport indication. I'll cover an update on observe multicast notifications, and then Ricard will have some update on the kudos key update protocol for OSCORE. And we conclude with individual submissions from Carles on co-op, in space, and over the bundle protocol. Any comment or any agenda bashing, anyone? Yeah, thanks, Christian. We are packed too. We need packed core probably. Okay, let's go through the working group and document status. First, we published somewhere towards the end of last year, FC 9668, with a very long title with a questionable use of acronyms, but still, this was important to build a strong bridge between the core work on co-op and OSCORE and the work done in Lake on EDOC. So thanks a lot for the working group for this. We have taken this habit to show what has happened to documents in other related working groups on a related topic, and there has been 2 recent publications from the CBOR working group on the updated CDDL grammar and CDDL, again, additional control operator. So 2 more RFCs from core. And in other working groups, again, in ACE, there has been a draft with EAP services for co-op approved for publication already with the RFC editor that we should see published anytime soon. What we have in SG evaluation is an initiative draft that started at the end of last year after IETF 121. This was quite urgent to upgrade for the best registration policies related to the co-op content formats registry. It's an SG evaluation now already scheduled with the telechat, and authors are working on comments mostly coming from IAN at the moment. Just to note that version 0 of the individual submission that started all this was supposed to expire in May 24. So since it's March 18 now, we may very much have this document approved for publication in less than 6 months since its inception, and that would be great. Okay, we also had a publication requested recently of the GroupCombis document obsoleting RFC 7390 on group communication for co-op. It's also in AD evaluation. So we got the AD review from our incoming AD, Mac Bishop, and well, the authors have, of course, as next step, addressing that review. We also could report other publication requests on other documents in other working groups, notably key group on OSCORE on the joining of OSCORE groups through the ACE framework, and related to that, still for the ACE framework, the management of OSCORE groups with an admin interface. And I can also mention the work in CBOR again on AD and Literal, pretty much in the same state, now waiting for AD go ahead. We have a lot of documents in post-working group OSCORE status. OSCORE GroupCom, meaning Group OSCORE, is now in version 25 that was submitted yesterday to address final needs that popped up during the Shepherd review, and the Shepherd write-up should also be completed now. So I think it's up for the chairs to double check, and it should be possible to request publication of this document anytime soon. Then we have more. We have conditional attributes, now in version 11, also under shepherding by Jaime. There were a few issues to address following the Shepherd review. That has been the case partly. That's the new version 11, also presented today by Jaime on behalf of Bill. There's probably little things more to do, but this should be ready to be shipped also soon. And then we also have href presented by Karsten later today. That's in version 20, addressing comments from the second working group last call. Looks like there's a few little things to do before proceeding with publication request, and Karsten will give you the details later. Here, the shepherd is Thomas. But we have more. Two documents really tied together, DNS over co-op and co-op DTLS LPN that Martina will present later. Those also completed the working group last call. We'll try to wrap up today. If everything is fine, I'll go ahead shepherding both in the next few weeks. And more. Co-op PubSub, Jaime will give an update. It's in version 18 now. We've just well, went through a working group last call. Let's see if we can declare it completed. There have been a few reviews. Esco the appointed shepherd. So of course, the next immediate step is really completing the working group last call. We also have Komai to mention. Some activities have to resume on that to fill some things that will remain open. We may want for next working group last call on this, but we already have an appointed shepherd, Michael Richardson. All right, just to mention other documents we have in the working group, a few working group items have been updated, but they're not in the agenda for today, so you're just encouraged to go through them and comment preferably on the list. And a few updated individual submissions, 3 of which are also in the agenda from today, and we'll hear from Martina and Carlos about those. And same for other working groups. There have been updates on 2 related documents I mentioned before, also in the ACE working group, and one in SHICLs updating the compression of co-op headers. Okay, and with document status, we really wanted to bring up this sort of slide again for this session. A feature of the IETF is definitely the amount of several reviews we hopefully get for different documents from different people with different backgrounds and expertise. For sure, there are process reviews that are assigned and hopefully unavoidable to happen. And of course, they did happen on a few documents mentioned here, but we have had many more very good reviews in the last quarter or so on so many documents in the working group. And thank you so much for the reviewers to that. Please keep this pace or do even better if you can. And these are just the reviews on the list on these documents. Then there have been even more countless activities on the GitHub as to issues, pull requests, comments, and whatnot. So please keep contributing in this respect. So words are cheap. So as a real token of appreciation, we would like to give to each reviewer and for each review, one little ducky. You can see here, and again, per review. So you are very much encouraged to review also as an incentive to get more duckies. And we can hand some of those to reviewers that are listed here that are here in the room. And for those who are not, well, we'll keep this tracked and we'll fix that in Madrid or at the first occasion we have. Thank you so much again. Right, last thing I believe, after Bangkok, we have already scheduled a series of interim meetings resuming in April 4, same usual time, every other Wednesday, interleaving with the CIVO working group interim meetings. And that will go until IETF 123 in Madrid. But all is scheduled, you should find the entries in the data tracker and notes pre-filled. Okay, that said, I think we are basically ready to start with the actual presentations, unless Francesca wants to add anything as AD.
Just that it was a pleasure to work with all of you, and Mike is here to become your incoming AD. So thank you.
Thank you for your service. Okay, if there's no, that was the slide on the introduction, and gaining a few more minutes, we can start with Karsten and his 3 presentations. You want to take control of the slides yourself, Karsten?
Yes.
You're a bit quiet, so I think it helps if you raise your mic boost a bit.
Yeah, I actually was a bit quiet. Okay, I have 3 agenda items that I think I can actually do in a relatively rapid succession. So I wanted to leave time for discussion and not do my usual giant slide progression. So the first document I would quickly like to bring up is the corrections and clarifications document. We started working on that a couple of years ago because there were persistent questions being asked by people on the list or in other environments, and it just seemed good to collect some clarifications. So maybe where the text was a little bit incomplete, but also corrections where we have text that might be misleading and where it's good to record the current state. So this is now a working group document of the core working group. It's living on GitHub, and much of the discussion around the individual issues is happening on GitHub. So it's worth looking at the GitHub repository, watching that in GitHub using the watch button. We currently have 32 active issues, and we are slowly eroding this mound of issues in core interims. So we usually find some time during an interim to look at 1, 2, 3 issues and make some progress there. And progress we have made is then recorded in the document. We have two categories, incomplete and incorrect, as I just mentioned. So for the incomplete case, we have the concept of a formal addition. So we are recording text that we would have liked to see in the document. This is taking the place of the somewhat inflexible RFC errata process. Of course, people can still put in errata. We're not going to stop that, but maybe it's better to develop a fix in the working group using some interaction, some revisions before we agree this is the way we want to do things. And we have, again, the incorrect case where we supply corrected text in the document. So right now, there was a focus on issues that really are issues. So something is not good about the documents we have, and we look at what needs to be fixed there. Now, it has turned out that we also have some situations that are not good in the sense that we have introduced some features, but we only describe them for specific cases, for specific protocol configurations or other things. And we had a discussion in the last interim about the BERT mechanism, which is just an unused value of the size exponent in the blockwise transfer mechanism. And the question really was, wouldn't it make sense to use the same mechanism to actually address these gaps as well? So a gap is a situation where the semantics of the current protocol are defined. So it's not like we have the need to clarify anything or the need to write additional text to make the specification more useful. But the semantics are somewhat unsatisfactory. So a BERT, for instance, is only defined for stream-based transports. It's missing from datagrams, even though we could use it with datagrams. So the idea is that this could lead to fixes that essentially exploit the orthogonality that we have in the protocol, or also fixes where we have various places where little extensions are being done, but it's now time to extract the commonality between these fixes or features, and say this is kind of a feature of the base protocol now that is used in the following three places and is recommended for other places as well. So the question really I would like to ask is, people who have looked at corrections and clarifications, is that something we should do in this document? Clearly, to make these changes actually effective, we will have to have a document approved. So there is no way around that, because the corrections and clarifications document is a working document. It's not approved in the sense that it actually makes changes to the documents. So the idea was to incubate those actual updates in the CORCLA document, but then at some point to decide to pull this out and make a separate document out of this. So my question would be, are people comfortable with addressing these gaps in corrections and clarifications like we already have the incorrect and incomplete cases, or should we really just start new documents right away before we have completed the discussions, also to develop the document, develop the discussion in the new document? So if anybody has an opinion on this would be a good time to go to the microphone.
Well, as an individual opinion, the incubator approach seems practical. to me. Does anyone have any opinion or objection, especially? No objections.
Good. So I will just do a -2 of the current document where I explain this additional category, and then we can start pulling in issues like issue 35 and describe the specific gaps that are brought up in those issues.
We have
Yeah, Christian is the author of issue 35, so that.
You do count, Christian.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So if you have any further ideas on this, there is the mailing list, of course. So please bring up any thoughts or concerns you have with that. Okay. Next item. I've talked about CoreConf a lot. We have these 2 documents that are RFCs and 2 documents that officially have passed working group last call, but that has been so long ago that maybe we need to do additional working group last calls. Right now, the priority is on getting those numbers in place. So we are trying to make sure that we have SIDs assigned to the Yang documents where people actually need SIDs. And the current activity is just to generate SIDs for all Yang models in RFCs. This is kind of an obvious thing to do. Of course, not all of these models actually need SIDs, but on the other hand, just having them for all of these models seems like an obvious way to reduce the threshold that is in the way of using things. Of course, after the RFC modules, we have to do the same thing with modules in internet drafts, but maybe we need even more cooperation from the authors of these internet drafts to do this, while the RFC modules are reasonably stable, so we simply can do that. So the snapshot of that work is out there on website. We have 232 models from RFCs turned into SID numbers. These SID numbers are not yet the final numbers we can assign because we still have to decide on the ranges we allocate for each of them. So at some point we need to allocate a SID range for each of these RFC models. And obviously we want to make that easy for us with some tooling, because at the number of a couple hundred, it's no longer easy to just do this manually. And then we want to run the SID generation again for the ranges we have allocated, and then check the SID files we have generated, and if we like them, actually register the range and the SID file that provides the actual numbers with IANA. So this all is based on the tool Pieng. That is in a slow development mode right now. We have a fork of Pieng in the core working group repository, so that not only contains documents, but it now contains a fork of a tool that should help us doing these range allocations and the SID allocations in there. And there are about 10 cases, 10 models where Pieng crashes, and we still have to analyze why it does that. Maybe there are some RFC models that are so full of cobwebs that it's not that easy to generate SID files for them. So for those cases, we probably have to check with the ecosystems that are using those models. So this is all work that is happening right now. And if you are interested in this, you can go to this snapshot website and look at the SID files that are sitting there. And maybe if you know a particular model, you can tell us whether the SID file generated for this looks right. Or maybe there are also RFCs where we want to do the SID file generation entirely manually. So in the SCHC context, for instance, we would want to do this. But in most cases, I think we can do the automatic generation. So if you are interested in Yang, interested in CoreConf, it would be good to hear from you what you can contribute to making this SID file generation going on. And of course, I would try to be done with this activity by next IETF, hopefully well before that, so we can look at a process for actually getting the SID file locations done for internet drafts as well. Okay, anybody who can raise their hand and say, oh, I'm interested in this right away at 3:56 in the morning. Okay, so I have mentioned this, and yeah, we are going to coordinate this in a separate list, but if you want to contribute, you can start with a core working group list and make observations there. So that was the CoreConf part. Any questions? Good, in which case I'm going to the CI part. So if you remember, we have had a long-running effort to actually get URIs more useful in a constrained environment, or maybe in a high-performance environment as well. So URIs were the part of the three legs of the web that we just took in unchanged when we started CoAP, and we now think that it's maybe a good idea to formalize the data model. We actually did this a bit when we designed CoAP, because CoAP doesn't send URIs around in the requests, but somewhat stylizes them into options. So you work with past URIs in CoAP, and this work is essentially just generalizing it and covering most of the URI data model. So we have reached a pretty significant milestone right now. We had a working group last call and received a lot of comments, and this is just one more example for the observation that you get the best reviews when you actually do the working group last call. I mean, you can ask for reviews before that, but people really understand that they now have to look when we do a working group last call. So we now have a draft -20, which was submitted the day before yesterday when it was possible again. It covers all working group last comments, also we believe. And yeah, the question is, what are we going to do? Yeah, ESCO points out that this, of course, leads to multiple working group last calls. But I'm not sure that this actually is a big problem, because a second last call usually is just checking that we got the solutions right. And depending on the complexity of the solutions, we should do that. So let's have a quick look at what this version -20 actually does. So -18 was the version that was working group last called. We got a lot of editorial comments. So this document has a long history and has morphed between different approaches in this history, and it's still somewhat the original document, and there was need to do editorial work. One little editorial item that we'll need to see how we get this through ISG and IANA. We don't want the initial population of the scheme number list in the RFC. It doesn't make sense to put an initial population there, which is immediately outdated by the fact that people really should be looking into the registry and not in the RFC. So I want to start a habit of not including initial allocations in the RFC if it's already clear that this outdates very quickly. So there is a remove in RFC bit set on that section, and it will be interesting to see how that works. The second thing that we found was that the terminology again still needed a little bit of update, and one problem was that the URI standard 3986 has some terminology, and we have been using this terminology for the CRI side as well, and it doesn't always fit. So we had some confusing sentences, in particular about the absence and presence of components. So I'll talk about that in the technical side, but the other terminology around that has been updated as well. So that's definitely something to check when you look at the working group score result at -20. Did we get this right? We also factored out discussion about normalization of text strings. So we now have a CRI text string that is a term that is defined. And we have an interesting way to do the normalization requirement, because it's not really a requirement, it's an assumption. So in the work where we looked at how to do Unicode in modern protocols, we originally had said just normalize everything, so there is no problem, everything is NFC. But then we found out that normalization can be destructive in certain writing systems. So that is kind of a bug of Unicode, but it's something that really keeps us from wanting to require normalization in each place where this could be checked. And of course, for constrained systems, having the tables for normalization around already is a pretty big stretch. So we want to have a situation where we assume the strings are in NFC, but it's not a requirement on every single implementation to always check that or to always run a normalization process, which, by the way, is comparatively expensive in CPU, surprisingly. So that's an interesting approach, which I think will be used more widely. But of course, it creates a situation where you cannot entirely rely on everything being NFC, because the implementation that sent you something could be faulty. Now, the fun thing is it could be faulty anyway, independent of what we write there. So, but there's also an assumption that if we have a source that should be giving us Unicode data, and we can assume the source is NFC, we don't have an onus on the protocol implementation to actually check that again. Okay, another interesting specification with wiggle room is the request for not using indefinite length encoding, and we clarified that if we ship CRIs around as separate items, please use definite length encoding. But if you include CRI in your application standard, and that application standard actually allows indefinite length encoding, you don't have to do something special just for the CRIs that are in your document. So this is now clarified. Okay, on to the more technical things. Well, these two items were technical, but really just fixes on the editorial side. We now have an explanation of what a stand-in item could be in a CRI. Well, that's essentially a CWAL concept that hasn't been written up yet, so that's why it's being used in various places in CWAL Pact, there's a separate draft on using stand-ins with Yang CWAL. It's useful for CRIs as well, and we explain how to do that. This always assumes that your application has decided it wants to use stand-in items and which stand-in items it wants to use. So CRIs just by themselves don't have stand-in items, but you can have an application that enables that. We noticed that we didn't allocate a tag for CRIs, so that's now being allocated, and that allows us to have the uppercase version for the EDN application extension. For CRIs in EDN, we use the lowercase versions of application extensions for raw, unwrapped data, and the uppercase version to have the data with the tag. Yeah, I mentioned this whole issue about CRI components being AppSet, and we said all top-level components are at least virtually present. They can be null in a specific case. Fragments, for instance, can be null. And in other places, we found a different representation. So query is now like path. It's just an array. And if the array is empty, then this means that particular component is not populated. Now that we no longer use null for the shortest version of a component, we have defined a default list. So we do tail elision based on the default list. If a component is on the default list, you can leave it away and the CRI array becomes shorter at the end. We made it clear that scheme numbers are preferred over scheme names. We made scheme names dot feature in the CDDL grammar, and explained, for instance, that proxy scheme and proxy scheme number don't mix. You cannot use both in one CoAP request. And we also changed the allocation a little bit, so the precious scheme numbers from 0 to 23 are only used for the really compact protocols, and CoAP plus WS and CoAP S plus WS get scheme numbers 24 and 25. So we have a little bit more room. We're curating the really short scheme number space a little bit. Okay, so this is a summary of what has changed technically. These are not massive changes, but they are reasons to actually look at your implementation again and do a few fixes. So I'm getting back to the question, can we just submit this to the ISG now? Or do we have to do the second working group last call that Esko alluded to in the chat?
So we've just had the second working group last call, in fact. So in case you'll be about considering a third one.
Correct.
Okay, as I understand, we wait for a version 21 anyway, because something was left around to fix, right?
Okay.
wasn't some small item left not included in this revision, based on some discussion with Christian especially?
There was something on a different document, but Christian, do you remember what this was about?
I think, if I remember correctly, that -20 addresses all the things that I raised.
Okay.
Yeah, this is also what I believe.
Okay, if you consider this version final, I would like to have feedback from the shepherd, Thomas. Following all these changes, I didn't have the impression that this had a critical mass to screen for a third working group was called personally. So it should be fine, but I'd like to check with Thomas again. And if he's fine with that, I think this can move forward with his shepherd right up, basically.
Great, and maybe the other people in the room can also have a look if they have specific concerns. If what I said sounded suspicious to you, please have a look. Good. So I'm done with my 3 little segments. Esko.
Yeah, I did have a question on the previous presentation. So about the SID value allocation. I think I just checked these models, and they seem to use all temporary SID values at this moment, right? So there still needs to be something there.
We didn't do the SID range allocation because we have to look at the number of SIDs that are in use for a model and estimate what range size we should use. That will be easier for new modules where we can immediately talk to the authors. But for those 232 plus a few models, we probably have to do this in a bulk process. And when we know how many SIDs should be in the SID range, we usually want to have at least a third of the SIDs we actually need in addition. So we have some slack for changes to the model. Then we can define the range and we can allocate that.
Yeah, and there should be those that already have SIDs allocated, I think should also be considered.
Certainly, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Any more questions or comments for Karsten or on href or SIDs? No, then we are done. Thanks a lot, Karsten. So we'll follow up with Thomas mostly on href.
Great.
Okay, next one should be Jaime with conditional attributes on behalf of Bill. And let's try the clicker here. First, I have to take it.
All right.
Wait. Oh. Now you're on.
Yep, it works. So, yep, I'll be presenting on behalf of Bill. He couldn't be here today. Basically, I'm the shepherd of this document, and yeah, I did a review. As you may see, actually, the title is different because it better reflects the contents of the draft. Before it was conditional attributes, now it's conditional query parameters for QAP Observe, which is what the draft is about. We went through some of the changes that you can see on the GitHub repo. I mean, on top of the title, basically, we clarified some of the decimal support for the conditional attributes. There's better text error handling as well, because it was maybe a bit underspecified, and then some few editorial fixes. There is still 3 issues open for discussion. We have some proposal for each of those. If there's other comments, we will go through. I mean, we can alter them, but if not, then we will just go with the proposed changes. So one of it is handling complex data structures. So at the moment, the query parameters are for scalar or Boolean values. So one of the questions would be like, how do you handle it if you are addressing a complex structure under the resource path? So for example, You see the I cannot point. Well, anyway, like you can see on the, you do a query like get with observe to sensor temperature, and then you use their CGT, and then you can maybe specify that it's equal to the value 20, for example, so that you can fetch a specific field. For example, in the case of SNML, you can fetch a specific SNML field. That would be one way to do it. Another way, that is the preferred option that we have at the moment. Another way would be to have a default scope, like for each of the conditional query parameters, and only apply to the V value field in SNML, so that make it more explicit. Maybe there is other ways to handle resource states with multiple records, or maybe we just don't support complex structures, which is also something we can choose. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has opinions on this, by the way, so feel free to, or maybe we take it at the end, all the comments, brother. So anyway, this is one. The second one, so basically this draft defines some query parameters that will be standardized, but of course, nothing prevents anybody else to use other query parameters for the application. The text doesn't really have much when it comes to mixing various query parameters in the observe. So in principle, we thought that would be totally fine. And we are basically maybe like writing some text to reflect that is fine to use mixed query parameters there. There's an example. And then the last one is more like it's not really a full issue, but there is the concept of resource state projection in the draft. And at least to me, I was not too familiar with it. I know there was an email discussion about it and it was presented there. And when I was looking for authoritative sources about it, I couldn't find them. Like some normative text, some sort of, a more detailed explanation. So the proposal is to expand a little bit on it in the current document, but I think it wouldn't be bad if maybe some other draft or some of the ongoing drafts, for example, in Think2Think RG or in other groups that have this type of definitions and, concept explanations could incorporate that. I don't know if an informational reference or non-normative reference could be done or, yeah, I don't know, like basically this seems to be something that would be useful for a reader, I think, even if it is familiar with COAP and REST. And that's basically it. All of those are in the issue tracker. And yeah, welcome for comments. Karsten?
Yeah, I think the issues are good examples for a gap we have in the categories we can sort specifications into. So right now we have informational documents, we have BCP documents, and we have standards track document. And for this document, I seem to remember that we decided we wanted to have this as a standards track document so other SDOs can do normative references to this document. So yesterday in another working group, I forget which one, the question came up whether maybe we need something more like a toolbox RFC that has components in it which you can use, but which to fully exploit, you probably need another specification that tells you how do I extract the information from SNML and what exactly is the kind of resource state projection that we are assuming here. So the document is standards track in a certain way, but it's also not exactly freestanding, or it at least has components that really are best used from another document. Now, other areas have solutions here, different solutions here. So for instance, in the security area, often crypto standards are informational because the crypto standard usually doesn't make sense before you actually start to use it in a specific environment. So they are kind of blessed the first time somebody references them in the normative way, and then they land in the downref list and can be used with less effort by other RFCs. I'm just mentioning here because we are not going to create a successful answer for this. We are not going to take out completely the tension that is here, because again, this is a toolbox. It's something that other documents, other specifications can use in their environment, and maybe add some more information how specifically this is meant to be in that environment.
Got it. Christian?
On the concrete issues, two opinions on 52.
You're a bit quiet, Christian.
Oh,
Can
okay.
you somehow boost your mic?
On the better now?
Better, yes.
Yep.
On the concrete issues, two suggestions on 52. I suggest leaving the handling of non-scalar values out, so that other documents might pick this up, but the other suggestions don't sound too appealing to me because they might break in particular situations. And on 51, this might go into the RESTful design document. I think that's in T2TRG.
You said T2 RG. Okay. Yep. Sounds good. So basically, like, to paraphrase a little bit, like, for instance, for 52, the draft could not support other than scalar and Boolean values, but for example, nothing prevents another SDO to define how to support more complex structures, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
for a particular type.
In the interest of being a really good and nice to use toolbox, this document actually could give this as an example for what somebody does, so it doesn't look like we are only addressing those cases, and if you have some other data structure, then you are on your own. These are still useful, but you have to say how they apply to a specific media type.
Right, so we can hint and provide an example, right?
Exactly.
And Christian?
Sorry, hand was lazy.
Okay. All right. Well, if there is no more comments, I think like basically those are the remaining ones, and Bill will do the changes based on the discussion, and that's pretty much it. I think this one also is in second work group last call or
No, we had one, it completed, now it's officially under Shepherd right up, so it's back on you again.
Yeah, back to right. So well, I will shepherd it then. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Next is Martina. I just have to do some juggling here. Change slide set. And you have it now.
Hello, my name is Martin, and yeah, I talk about this DNS over co-op bundle, which is basically a collection of 3 drafts. 2 of them are in working group last call. So yeah, first of all, there's DNS over co-op itself, which passed the working group last call since IETF 121. There's a typo in the title of the slide. I addressed the reviews by the reviewers. The most significant change, I guess, that came out of that is that we now clarify that opcode beyond 0 is not supported for now. Then there is the DTLS APN draft, which basically just introduces that number. Also working group last call and address the reviews by Esko and Marco. And then there is the core DNR draft, which is basically a problem statement on how to possibly do DNR with OSCORE servers. And yeah, we introduced there 2 example scenarios just to give an idea what we want to do there. And we also broadened the objectives of the ACE profiles. And just to give an overview again over all the drafts and RFCs that belong to this whole bundle, but the minimal bundle is basically that what's marked in yellow, and that is what is now going, is past the working group last call. So yeah, I guess I will focus now a little bit more on the core DNR part, which is about the discovery of network designated OSCOR-based resolvers. And the next step there will be to sharpen the whole document into two main topics. First of all, to lead the doc client to do object security and also help a doc client to find the security context. These can be possibly independent from each other. For example, where you have A but not B is when you use ad hoc with some web PKI-like infrastructure, so basically TLS-based ad hoc. Also, Marco already pointed out that some of the problems we pointed out there could be solved with the OSCOR app profiles in Lake, I believe. Yeah, ad hoc app profiles. Yeah, sorry, in Lake, yeah. But as you might hear, I'm not that much of an OSCOR ad hoc or ACE expert, so reviews on that are appreciated. So we can go on with this draft. So yeah, and just to finish up my talk, there is a small hackathon report. I was porting DNS over co-op to the Unbound DNS resolver. It is based on libcoop, so co-ops and OSCOR are supported. It was originally implemented as a bachelor thesis about 1 year ago. What's done so far is just the rebase to the current Unbound master and a lot of code cleanup. And the goal for the week is to get this into a merge-ready state. There are still some conceptual flaws in the code that need to be cleaned up. And also some tests are needed so that the Unbound people actually want to have it. And another thing that we did at the hackathon, or started at the hackathon, was integrated another student project into Fedora with the help of Benson, who I saw in the chat already. Yeah, and it's called DigDoc. So it's like Dig, but for doc. And yeah, that's hopefully on a good way. There's still some discussion regarding the tests, but yeah. So that's it from my side. Are there any questions?
As you said on core DNR, yeah, you expect an editorial revision to split into two distinct clearer parts, and we can synchronize it better with transport indication, I think, that Christian will present later, and with that document in Lake to decide what fits best where, but we had a first idea already to start from. Okay, on the first two documents you mentioned, yeah, DNS over co-op and co-op the TLS LPN, there have been no recent comments after the new revisions based on the working group last call. Are you aware of any issues still open?
So far, as far as I'm aware, no.
No, okay. Then I think we are done with that. We can declare the two working group last calls completed. This can proceed with the Shepherd write-up. They're both on me. Well,
sorry.
This week that's life. This week already I plan to start the confirmation of authorship and the IPR poll, and in the next few weeks I'll work on the two write-ups. We definitely plan to ship this together to the ISG. I reviewed the documents during the working group last call already, so I don't really expect to find anything more during the further Shepherd review I'll do other than needs probably, but
okay,
I think we are good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next is your end. Hang on.
Yep.
No, you're on.
Right. So I'll be presenting as well the PubSub draft. It's a long-term draft in version 18 at the moment. Last time I presented was in IETF 1.1. I think it was version 14. Since then, we have had many reviews. One from the AD, that was one of the inputs at the time. The IANA clarifications, the IANA part, basically, it was completely rewritten since version 14. Then from ESCO, I got a set of, basically, we have worked on the document together and addressed some of his comments. There's some of them you can see in the issue tracker. Basically, the use of single quotes. Some of them are relatively minor, but affect the whole document. Others are a bit larger. Yeah, I mean, from those, I think they are cleared. You feel free to check them out. Maybe the one that is up for discussion, and I will present. I mean, there's a discussion section at the end of the presentation. The RT, CT, and OPS attribute deletion. So eliding attributes from the responses. How do we do that, or do we want to do that in general? So I will go through that later, and then editorial changes. And then recently I got a very thorough review by Marco. Sorry, and I addressed some of the other issues from the Shepherd write-up. We also got an IANA early review, and seems to be fine. Yeah, and then addressing Marco's review, which was very thorough. There is some points of discussions that will go through it at the end as well. And then on the hackathon, basically we have an implementation based on IO Co-op, Python implementation, Python-based. I cleaned it quite a bit and provided some examples. And I thought, like, from the point of view of someone who wants to understand the document, it was maybe more useful to have some sort of tutorial demo. And there's now a script that basically explains all the different interfaces for topic creation, for using the topic data, how to subscribe, how to publish, and so on. That should be easier for a relatively newcomer to get to understand it. A bit of a quick recap. There's maybe two main blocks or components. One is the configuring of the topics by some sort of administrator. So that creates some configuration of how the publishers and subscribers will use it. And then there is the actual PubSub aspect. So at a high level, publishers and subscribers are both Co-op clients. The subscription pattern uses observe option from Co-op. The broker acts as a server that is hosting the topic resources, both topic resources and topic data resources. That's an important distinction because topic data is the thing that you subscribe to and you publish to. The topics have a life cycle. So basically the 3 states: half created, fully created, or deleted. And here the main thing is that you may delete the topic data resource, but that doesn't delete the topic. So basically it goes into a half created state in which publisher may publish again, and then it goes into fully created, and it is when it is fully created that you can publish and subscribe on it. Important distinction because there is some discussion items. So basically there is, when you create a topic, as I said, it's a configuration, there is a set of parameters, and there was a request to have the behavior of initialization of the topic so that it can go directly into the fully created state. That parameter is called initialized. And when you set it to true, it goes directly into fully created state, and clients can subscribe, and even if technically there hasn't been no publication first. So when the first publication arrives, you treat it as if it was not the first, but the second. So you don't get a 201 created, but rather like a 204. That was a minor thing, but it was important also, I think, and basically now it's reflected in the document. Another one from these 3 are from Marco's review, by the way. That's why I'm pointing at him a few times. Then the other one is topic data deletion. There was actually a big error in the document at the time. So when the topic data resource is deleted, the broker does not delete the topic data property. So it goes back into half created state, as I mentioned. And the same thing applies if you're using initialized. So that's another one. And then the rate limiting aspect. So if you have a publisher publishing too frequently, you return 4 to 9 and rate limit the publisher. So the current spec deals with the publishers. It doesn't really convey any information to the subscribers about the fact that the topic data that they're subscribing to is being rate limited. It's intentional. I don't see a reason why treat it differently, because in Co-op you don't have that feature. So technically a subscriber is a Co-op client. So I would prefer to leave it that way, but I was wondering if the group would have some comments. And then the other topic, this one is coming from ESCO's review from the Shepard write-up. So basically, normally you will receive, when you do a get and you get back a payload, you receive also the resource type that you are reading. The point of ESCO is that you can actually elide that information if the spec already has the details, because you are assuming that the co-op, both endpoints are compliant to the spec, so you don't need to repeat it every time, and you can actually save a lot of bytes in the wire. And sorry, this is on a, so this is an interesting concept. We have adopted it for this draft, but this is something that maybe other drafts could also consider. I don't know if there are many drafts that could cover this at this point. I don't think we want to do it retroactively, but yeah, it's a interesting discussion. It's on the mailing list, and yeah, it's a change we have implemented as well. So basically, the situation at the moment is that this is the older slides. Basically, we got several reviews and addressed the comments. We got even a review yesterday at 1:30 a.m. from Christian, which I have briefly glanced upon, but I think some of the topics he mentioned are addressed in the editor's copy. More reviews are welcome, preferably if they are in the form of PRs in the GitHub repository. And that's it, basically. Carsten.
Yeah, so on slide 9, thank you for switching back to that. I think that this is actually an important point. RFC 6690 has a query to a well-known core resource and explains what this query should return. Now, the wording of this document, which was written in 2012, at a time when we didn't have all good understanding of everything here, the wording isn't great. But I would assume that with a well-known core resource query, you essentially get a subset of the resources in the well-known core. So that doesn't mean that this somehow covers every query that you ever do with CoAP. This is specific to a well-known core. So if you ask a broker, what do you have? Then of course the answer can be formatted in a way that is useful to the client. The reason why there is a strong incentive to leave out the RT component is that the original link format makes it relatively expensive. So some 10 years ago, not quite 10 years ago, we abandoned the idea of doing a JSON or CBOR version of link format. And if we had done a CBOR version, then we would be able to use CBOR packed to make including all the information really cheap. But we don't have that. So we have incentive for a server to actually trim this down. And of course, if a client says, give me everything that has resource type core PSConf, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to include this in all the responses. I think it's more open for discussion whether leaving out content type, the content format is always the right thing to do. But yeah, the server can decide that. So we don't have to specify the details. It's just that the client must be able to do something useful with the result.
Yep. Is cool.
Yeah, just wanted to agree with Carsten here. So we are talking specifically about queries that are not done on well-known core, but basically on a resource in the broker that is defined in the scope of this draft. So I think there you can use link format in a particular way. So for example, include certain attributes or exclude attributes that are the same for all the resources that are returned. So this is what we're doing here, I believe. And maybe good question is yeah, why was this CBOR link format idea abandoned? I think I missed that, the reason why that was done.
No, I'm also wondering, like, it would be interesting to revisit it, because it sounds like a CBOR pack could be useful here.
Yep, that's right.
Maybe I can provide some input there, because I was in one of the reviewers back then. One problematic aspect was that the resulting format almost looked like it would be working as JSON LD, but that really showed that a lot of the conversions that you would want to do would require per target attribute conversion rules to actually make sense. And that was something that the original document was not set out to do. That was designed to be a mechanical translation, and you can't mechanically translate from something that has white space separated values in its RT into something that is semantically and structurally usable. You need it to be semantically and structurally usable in order to apply packed, unless you start doing packed with like concatenating things with strings to become useful again. So the goals would need to shift a bit, and the goals shifted back then into Coral, which has not made so much progress in the, well, which has made a lot of progress in the last 10 years, but not to the point of completion yet. Yeah, I think the other aspects that I raised my hand over are probably better to take into the list.
Thank you. Carsten, your hand is still raised.
Yes. So I just want to mention that indeed the Coral work is supposed to be the replacement for those formats. Well, the document, of course, is still there, just has expired. So if somebody wants to use it, that is going to work. But I think we are using link format everywhere right now, and probably should only start to initiate a transition when we have Coral in a finished state.
Well, in any case, it's something that goes beyond this document, by the way. It's just for the group, for other documents. Esko?
Yeah, so you mentioned also indeed the Shepherd write-up. So that's something I probably didn't do yet. Could be a next step, because I'm not fully sure what the exact procedure is. So you can coach me in that. And I think
my plan is to address the comments from Christian as soon as possible, and update the editor copy in GitHub, so you can look at that one. And if anybody has comments, please do PRs, it's faster. And then submit version 19, and then you can do the Shepherd write-up on that one. So all of this should happen in the coming days.
Yeah, there's also a Shepherd review. I think that's also something that's happening in parallel.
Well, the review, you can do the review too.
Yeah.
In extension to the one that you already did.
Yeah, so the one I did was just preparation, basically, for the working group last call. Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we should give a lot of these little talks to many people.
As a reminder, yeah, of course. Yeah, Carsten is the chair under control of this document for the sake of progressing its status. I'm a contributor, so I recuse myself from any such actions here.
Yep.
Okay, any more comments or questions for Jaime?
All right, thank you.
Thank you all. Next is Christian. One second, Christian.
Hello, good morning. Okay, I'm here to talk a bit about transport indication. Thanks for the slides. The goal of this document, for a very brief recap, is to do two things. it should enable co-op clients and co-op servers to advertise that they can be used with different transports. For example, there is an additional TCP possibility open. And that's on the more practical side, and on the more procedural side, to establish how new co-op transports are supposed to work without adding a new co-op plus something scheme for every new transport, which was accepted with some gnarling teeth for co-op over TCP and WebSockets. The most recently updated version addresses a lot of items that we talked about in the December interim. Most prominently, that it struck on the side of describing how different transports are used. It pulls in a step of describing what the components are that the client discovers in order to then pick that proxy. So those are currently described in an informal way as which transport there is, what the address on that transport is, and for any transport that is IP or TCP or UDP based, that would be an IP address and a port, and any additional metadata, as you could, for example, get some things like if there is an encrypted client, hello, what is the ESN, what is the key for that? And orthogonally, there are different ways of reaching that information. What has always been in this document is that this information can be extracted from, and I just see that these are the older slides, so I think I can work with that. But I'll just open the new ones in parallel so that I can. Great, there we go now. Okay, anyway, proxies is cutting things a bit short here. What this should say is proxies that are explicitly advertised through web links, which has been in the document for since its inception, and the document has recently started to pick up the work in RFC 9460 on advertising with SVCP, and this is now described as one more means to obtain that information. The third possibility that is not explicitly described, but that is always an option, is for that information to be explicitly provided by the application.
Christian, can you switch off your video because you seem to be breaking up now and then?
Okay, sure. Sorry. So
keep talking.
On the side of how are new transports, how should new transports work? Just to recap, the plan is that the lookup of the name of the authority component is supposed to provide all the information pieces that are then needed to decide which which detailed co-op transport and possibly which parameters on that are supposed to be used. For IP transports, the plan there is that they would just go with SVCP records, so that any client that supports, say, co-op or QUIC would not even start doing A or quad A records, but would do the SVCP lookup right away, and then discover that, hey, by the way, that server advertises that it is supporting co-op over, say, QUIC. The big gap here is that you can do this when things come from DNS. You can reasonably expect that any other lookup service, and be reminded that 7252 never said that it needs to be DNS. It just says the system provides a resolver. We can expect of that resolver to provide that kind of information, but we do not get that information out of IP literals. So for that, an additional way of expressing IP literals along with other information has been described, and the new version of the document updates this. The hard part here, and I'll come to that later in the questions, but it's worth pointing out here already, the hard part here is not so much to create that serialization into host components or into something that looks like DNS labels, even if it's not used like that. But the hard part is that in order to do that exercise, that information model needs some kind of formalization first. And that is what slows this document down. So one of the questions I'd like to repeat here that has already been brought up in the interim is, can we achieve the goals of this document already without completing the work on .service.ARPA here? We don't need it right now. We will need it when the next IP-based transport comes up, but I think that a sketch plan might be sufficient here, and that's eventually up to the ADs also to decide whether that works for them, because that was whom that promise was made to have a plan before registering any additional transports. There are other users and there are other documents that are picking up work that has been started here, but not all of that is in a state where it can complete. So I think it might make sense to offload this particular aspect into some parts into other documents and some parts into future work in order to get the larger aspect of discovering the transports and having a plan for new transports. There are other questions open too, in particular around how to best work with how to best phrase things in terms of SVCP records, and some editorial work on what are the distinctions between something discovered from an SVCP record versus something discovered from the proxy. But in my opinion, the largest thing here, right next to the question of do we need the literal part in this document already, is please have a look at this document. This has been almost flying blind for quite a long time. We have talked with you at interims, but I don't think that other than the authors, anyone has read the full document since like 2 years ago or so. Please give us some reviews. Doesn't need to be 5 people jumping in it. It doesn't need to be like full in-depth reviews, but please have a look so that we can make progress and that we're not like getting stuck in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Any comments or questions? Yeah, indeed, do review, and I believe reviews will come considering the exercise we plan with this document and core DNR and the lake document. Karsten.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit historical context, this was a check we wrote in 2017 to pay for the COEP over TCP and TLS document, and this check has since bounced. We have not been able to solve this problem properly. I think the answer to your question, Christian, is that we need to understand the information model, what we expect from something like literal form or reg name form, but we don't need to define that reg name form in the same document. It would be nice, but we don't need to.
Thanks. That's not the easiest outcome, but that's something I might work with.
Okay, thank you again. So I quickly set things up. I think I'm next. All right, everyone, this is an update on the Observe Multicast notification document, now in version 11. To recap, this is intended for scenarios where co-op observe is used, but we specifically have multiple clients all observing the same resource at the same server. So that can happen in a normal way with the individual clients observing individually and the server sending back notifications individually to each of those clients. That sounds a bit inefficient, and this is supposed to overcome that inefficiency at the end of the day in the interest of performance for the network as a whole and for the clients. The idea here would be to build somehow a single whole group observation with the client still taking a first step asking to observe, but the server rejects that request with an error response providing information to instruct all the clients in the same way to participate in a group observation and set themselves up to be ready to receive the notifications for that observation, but sent as responses over multicast. So it's all about putting all the clients on the same page in two respects. One is transport, and that happens basically via the co-op token value. One is security, Grupo score is security for protecting end-to-end the notification responses. And that also happens providing particular parameter values used to protect those OSCORE messages. It really boils down to the server building this phantom observation request like if it was sent by the group, but really sent to itself without hitting the wire. And anything follows by instructing the clients properly. So the group notifications are actually bound to that phantom observation request. Okay, this is version 11, and this was last presented with version 9. Between 9 and 10, that was just a minor update, mostly editorial and addressing some comments received from Ayana and other Ayana-related things that we noticed on the regis policies of a particular registry we are creating, and on better defining the so-called augmented registration policies, considering also the possible use of early registration per RFC 7120. But then most of the work actually happened in this latest round with the update from version 10 to version 11. And this slide is about 1 point. We have had all along text forbidding redirection of multicast notifications. We practically want them to be sent by the server from the same addressing information used to send those error informative responses. We still want that, that is still the case, but that was formulated in a way that was ruling out something legitimate that we actually want to admit. Normally, a client sends a unicast observation request going to fail, like I explained, to a single server, and that server will follow up. But actually, a client may want to send a traditional observation request to be rejected over multicast to target multiple servers at once, and then all those servers can fail and follow up with instructions to set each a group observation. So the original text we had to forbid redirection was ruling out that case, and that wasn't the intention. So we revisited that text to still forbid redirection, to really say what we mean, but now allowing also the case where a client sends a one-to-many multicast original observation request, and they should be stable now. As another update, the real motivation for this is in the next slide, but at that point we took the opportunity to define this properly. This is the notation of the payload in that error informative response. Among other things, can include an optional parameter introduced now, ending, specifying the point in time where the server has planned to terminate the group observation, just to let the client know to really not expect anything after that. And yeah, even though the main motivation comes in the next slide, it felt just useful for completeness to properly define this information there, just in case. Of course, it's an optional parameter. If absent, it's undefined where the observation can end. But this was triggered by this, in fact. We had already an Appendix A where we define how, in addition to that informative response sent as an error to a coming client, the server may be proactive, start a group observation anyway, even with no clients around yet, and publish somehow group observation data to be fetched by clients that can be set themselves ready to participate in a group observation. And we have two concrete examples of these other means. One is a PubSub scenario where that group information can be published as metadata of a topic to be discovered. And another one thinks of clients that can sniff more or less intentionally a multicast notification, take the token value, and introspect it at the server to get more information about the ongoing group observation. We discussed among authors that in case the server publishes in advance this group observation information, the server should really specify the point in time where the observation is supposed to be terminated. And that's then one more piece of information to put in this early advertised group observation data. And we also thought that here the time indication from the server should really be taken as a commitment from the server to absolutely not terminate the group observation before the time comes. However, before that time comes, the server can still retract the early published group information data, especially if we are getting close to the planned termination of the observation, and to prevent very late, close to the end clients to come to just starting something big for just a little time, basically. So absolutely not terminate before the advertised time. You may retract the advertisement before that advertised time. And that information is now building on, that piece of information, sorry, is now building on the parameter that we introduced in general that I showed in the previous slide. And finally, we added one more appendix, appendix H. This considers a particular advanced scenario where we have a reverse proxy and end-to-end security with Grupo score. We were covering already a few setups with a forward proxy. We were still missing this one. And with a few differences, it's actually quite similar to the scenario we had already in Appendix G with the forward proxy and with end-to-end security, based in particular on the end-to-end protected deterministic requests to enable cacheability of the responses, in this case of the multicast notifications. And we still have the server here expected to publish in advance the information to participate to this group observation. So it's really similar to the analogous case with the forward proxy. The main difference here is that, of course, the proxy is reversed, so the clients are just imagining to talk to an origin server as usual, but we can at the same time expect the server to be aware of some configuration details, including the addressing information that the reverse proxy advertises to the client. And thanks to that, the information early published by the server are intentionally specifying as server-side information the addressing information of the reverse proxy, and as client-side information, nothing. And that intentionally leaves the client in the dark, forcing the client to take essentially one particular next step, barring step one that is just a pre-initialization step in case clients are really minimally initialized. A client knowing nothing in terms of client-side information takes step two, which is essentially about sending the phantom observation request retrieved from the early public data to the server-side information it got, which is the addressing information of the reverse proxy. And that's really the only different thing, because what follows step three, it's exactly what you have in the scenario with the forward proxy, as exchanges between the reverse proxy and the server to instruct the reverse proxy to listen to multicast notifications to be cached, in this case, and forward back to the origin client. So the description of this is quite stable to be a first version. We have to improve that and to clarify some details, and I would really love to include also an example of message exchange to fix ideas. But there's a first fairly good version already now in Appendix H, I think. And next steps really build on this. One is exactly on this reverse proxy setup, where we need to add a concrete example. And while working on that, we noticed that in some particular situations in this setup, the server-side information or the overall transport-specific set of information can be redundant, meaning it can be omitted. We should look a bit closer into that, but that was the feeling, which opens for making that entry in the error informative response optional altogether in the general data model. We know that normally it's there, it's supposed to be there really as required, but there are particular cases and setups like this with the reverse proxy where it can practically be omitted because it'd be redundant anyway. And the second point related also to transport indication presented by Christian. We are now indicating the server side and client side transport specific information in the error response with CRIs, of course. And we are already saying, as intended, that the client side information to include and their format have to be understood depending on the transport used. That's also fine, so far so good. But as to understanding the transport used, now we are saying that's about the URI scheme specified in the CRI of TPI server, of the server side transport specific information. And that is not really correct anymore, considering the development in transport indication. The URI scheme alone is not sufficient in general to determine the transport used, which is something that you should do instead, looking at the pair URI scheme authority. So we have to generalize that part to indicate clearly how the transport used is determined, and based on that, understanding what information has to be specified for the client side and in what format, which practically means also revising and simplifying the structure of the new IANA registry we are introducing, what that information is practically provided, using the transport used as lookup key to find the right entry and information. And I think this is all I had. Of course, comments and reviews today or in the list or in the GitHub are welcome. Thank you. Karsten.
Yeah, I have a editorial question. First of all, let me say that this is amazing technical work. So I really like seeing this develop. The internet draft currently is 99 pages. And I mean, on one hand, this is great. We have wonderful examples that explain various scenarios and so on. So this is a good thing. On the other hand, I'm wondering if we can find a way to make these specs a little bit more accessible. For instance, by separating out the actual specification from the examples, or like ad hoc did, where we have specification and then we have traces document. Yeah, I just want to encourage some thinking in this environment, because we are going to hit the 100 pages in the next revision, certainly. And we need to make sure that we keep the sizes of our drafts under some control. Just yeah, asking to start thinking about that.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. A lot comes from appendices that are about message exchanges and pseudocode also for some algorithms. So yeah, an easy way out, I don't know if it's good, is having a separate informational document taking that content, but of course, we welcome proposal, but you're right. Matthias.
Yes, Matthias Kovac, Siemens. Somehow Karsten complemented my thoughts that I had looking at this. So I wonder if this complexity can be adopted on a larger scale. Like, I don't know if you have already feedback from implementers other than you as authors who are experimenting with this, because it feels like you really want to put every corner case already in this kind of starting specification, which makes then rolling it out, I think, yeah, a very high entry barrier. So I don't know, for instance, if you need all the proxy chains to get this working. So usually I would say you would need this efficiency in, let's say, field bus level networks, so where you collect this data. But once you go through proxies and so on, I would say you even have maybe a break in what is the multicast support that you have across these networks. And I don't know, so hearing that also how big it become, how many appendices you have, can this be narrowed down to maybe focus on use cases that make it really efficient, where you gain something from this. And I mean, these multicast notifications were something we discussed a long time ago, because it is very neat to have. But then having all this complexity in there, I'm not sure if you can shove this through the door or get then many implementers for this and deployments. So reduce the scope, get something very robust, something rather simple to implement working, and then take it maybe from there through additional add-ons to solve the problem once they appear.
Can I take this?
Sure.
So a lot of that work on proxies is not so much specifying what to do, but more showing that what we specify works transparently as long as the proxies are set up right. So a lot of that is to some extent to convince ourselves that we are not breaking the REST architecture. I think we can eventually take a lot of that out again, possibly into another document that would then be informative and just explain that. And by the way, this also works in those cases, maybe with some hints as to which configurations you need to pick to make it work. But I don't think that this is really supposed that we intend this to be normative content. So yes, I think we can slim it down a lot here.
Yes, and thanks, Matthias. For now, we just wanted to put all on the table, also as a sanity check, and to reassure that that would actually work. If less needed, especially, we can just remove it altogether. Or right, if there's enough critical mass, that can be material for an informational document that describes. By the way, it works also in these cases if you do this and that. But for sure, already now we are not specifying anything new in those appendices.
Yeah, so checking whether something works through the proxies, this is definitely important. So I personally saw this somewhere else in a different standardization body not being done and leading to issues there. So maybe I can have a look at this. So some other pieces like IANA registry and so on, it feels a bit overwhelming to me that it's still a high entry barrier, what you have to do to set it up. Maybe there can be some simplifications so that the mechanism itself, how you redirect and basically to receive it via the multicast channel, if something could be done there, that would be very nice, I think. But thanks for the explanation.
Thank you. Looking forward to your feedback. If you want to start, of course, from the document body, that includes only no proxy, yes proxy. Thank you all. Oh, sorry, Esko.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just thinking about what people mentioned and Matthias said about the proxy case. If that is the thing that leads to a lot of extra content, then kind of splitting it out into an informational document is something worth investigating, I think. And in the main document, you can just say like something like it works. Thanks.
There seems to be very much consensus on that. Great. Thanks. Thank you all.
Yes, I'll go right ahead. So thanks everyone. I'll be presenting some updates on the key update for OSCORE kudos work. Just to recap what this is about. It's about a way for renewing key material for OSCORE. Basically, you want to renew your master secret and master result, and thus getting fresh sender and recipient keys. And there are a couple of reasons you may want to do this, like application policies or exceeding key usage limits, where it's no longer safe to keep using your keys. We have a couple of nice properties for kudos. We're not changing the ID context of OSCORE, which has some benefits that's more specified in the draft. You can achieve forward secrecy. We're agnostic to the key establishment method originally used. You can have used adhoc, you can have used static setup. It's loosely inspired by the Appendix B2 procedure of the OSCAR RFC. And on a very high level, it's about you have a context CTX old, you want to get a new context with fresh keys, and we call that CTX new. So what is this update about mostly? It's a major redesign using a more flexible and simpler approach. Thanks to Christian for feedback on this, and we had a very good discussion with him in Dublin about this. So he inspired this idea really. So just again on a high level, what this is about, like how does this function? It's all built on an exchange of nonces, N1 and N2. And we also kind of decouple from the co-op request response model and the concept of client and server. So these nonces don't have to be exchanged in a request followed by a response. It can be 2 requests, 2 responses, any kind of, like observation, notifications, or whatever. It doesn't matter. The key is you want to exchange 2 nonces, one from one pair and one from the other pair. The nonces are placed in this extended OSCAR option that you can see here. So we extended it to hold an X byte and a nonce field. And the X byte basically contains some flag bits that you can signal if you want to preserve observations, if you want to use the forward secrecy mode or no forward secrecy mode. And the reason we have the no forward secrecy mode is to support very constrained devices that are unable to store information to persistent memory. So they will lose that when they reboot. Of course, it's recommended to use the forward secrecy mode if possible. And we have an update CTX function that we basically use for deriving the new key material. It will take the nonces, the X bytes, the old context, and produce a new context with new key material. Yeah, and one nice benefit of this is typically it will complete in one round trip. So what are the main changes? Again, the main thing is this major redesign based on an updated state machine. So why did we do this? Well, first of all, this is a much more flexible design. We don't need anymore this concept we used to have of the forward and reverse message flows, the concept of like a first and a second message. No rigid roles as far as like who's the initiator, who's the responder. The ordering of the nonces on the wire no longer matter. So it doesn't matter when they arrived or were transmitted. And you also don't need to send the other pairs nonce on the wire, which reduces overhead. And there's just in general less aspects to worry about in the sense of, much more easy ways to avoid deadlocks. We could cut a very large section from the draft about like avoiding deadlocks. And it's adaptive to different message exchanges in the sense that you can have really any co-op message and you're not locked to this strict like request response setup. So what did we do? Well, one major thing also in addition to this is actually we formally defined this concept of CTX bootstrap, which is relevant for these non-capable devices that have to use the no FS mode of kudos. And it's just a naming trick in a sense. Basically, like the non-capable devices will have some kind of bootstrap material they start with. And when they build their OSCAR context, we call it CTX bootstrap. And this helps to distinguish and explain in the text what will a non-capable device do versus what will a capable device do. And a non-capable device will always use CTX bootstrap as input to update CTX, because that's the only context it can actually preserve, since it will lose everything upon reboot. So we define now 2 different types of kudos messages. And on a high level, this is just about has one nonce been exchanged between the pairs, or have both nonces been exchanged between the pairs? And we use this bit in the X byte to signal what type of kudos message it is. And one type is a divergent message. And this is basically saying that, okay, the sender pair of this message is offering its own nonce in the message, and it's waiting to receive the other pair's nonce. So only one nonce has been exchanged. And this message is protected with this temporary security context CTX temp. So you have your CTX old starting context, you have your CTX temp, which is an intermediate kind of ephemeral context, and then you have CTX new, which is the context you arrive at after finishing kudos. You also have the convergent message, which is basically saying, okay, I'm the sender pair, I'm offering my own nonce, I have received your nonce, and now I'm waiting for key confirmation because the nonces have been exchanged. Further updates. So one thing we did actually is we kind of bind the nonce and the X bytes to CTX old. And the intent is to keep using the same pair of nonce and X bytes until you have successfully completed a kudos execution. So until you successfully complete it, you don't have to make up a new nonce. And basically this pair will be, when you invoke this update CTX function to derive a new context, okay, look at your CTX old. Does it have a nonce associated with it? If it has, use it. If not, derive a nonce and associate it with the context. Another trick that we did now to be agnostic of the order of which the nonces are sent on the wire, because different pairs may have like different perception of which is the first and second nonce. So we thought, okay, let's kind of avoid that whole problem by simply sorting the input. So if both pairs have exchanged both nonces, they have an input 1 and they have an input 2, well, then inside the update CTX functions, these are sorted in lexicographical ordering, so that yeah, they're sorted based on their content, not based on their time. So now going into more details on the kudos state machine. So basically we have 3 different states, with the idle state, the busy state, and the pending state. And normally when the pairs are not running kudos, they will be in the idle state. The pair starts kudos by entering the busy state, and you successfully complete kudos by entering back into the idle state. And at that point, the pair has the new score security context CTX new, and it has achieved key confirmation. So it's, you know, you don't finish kudos until you actually have key confirmation. You may want to represent your internal state using 2 bits. So you have the idle state 0, 0. And then you actually have busy states, but it's 2 substates because it depends if, you know, I offered my nonce and the other pair hasn't, or the other pair has offered its nonce and I haven't. So you kind of want to distinguish those 2 substates. And then you have the pending states, basically saying that the pair is running kudos, it's offered its nonce, it's received the other pair's nonce, so the nonce exchange is done. However, it's waiting for key confirmation. That's the only remaining point to finish kudos. And now to show a picture of the state machine. So this is how it looks. You have your idle, you have your busy, you have your pending states. And you also have this kind of pre-idle, which is just a kind of a cleanup stage. It could just as well be like part of the idle state, but more for a presentation. It's clear to present it this way. And I marked in red, you may see that some situations would be atypical, or like only send if stalled, or only will happen if a device reboots. So it's those are kind of rare branches you usually wouldn't take. But just to kind of think about it, like let's say you have a pair and this pair wants to run kudos. So what will it do? Well, it's, I can't really point, but basically it will send a divergent message, including its own nonce. And because it sent that message, it will now enter the busy state. And the pair B received that divergent message. It will respond with a convergent message, providing the nonce of pair B. And since pair A is now in the busy state, waiting, it will receive this convergent message. And as you can see, it will now transition from busy to pending. Actually, sorry, in that case, it will transition from busy straight back to the idle state because it has, in fact, finished kudos and received key confirmation. And if you think about the other pair's side, it will just be in idle state. It will suddenly receive a divergent message, which will trigger it to go to busy state. But upon entering busy state, since it has the other pair's nonce, it can immediately send the convergent message, providing its own nonce. And now it moves to pending. So this case is a little bit different because this pair will end up in pending and it has to wait now until it gets key confirmation. Okay, so how does it get key confirmation? Either by receiving an all-score protected message that's protected with the new security material, or you can also receive a convergent message. And I think I also want to show this kind of the message flow that can also illustrate things in a better way. Now, if you follow, like basically the green boxes would be the state on pair A, and the red boxes would be the state on pair B. We call them client and server in this case. And as you can see, the client will start in the idle state. It will send the divergent message with its own nonce. Now it transitions to busy state. Meanwhile, the server is in idle state. It receives a divergent message, and thus it transitions into busy state. And because the server received the divergent message, it will respond now with the convergent message, including its own nonce, and transition into pending state. The client receives that convergent message. It's protected with CTX new. The client achieves key confirmation. The client goes back to idle, thus finishing kudos. Meanwhile, the server is still in pending. However, because the client is now sending an OSCORE protected request protected with CTX new, that is received by the server, and the server can now transition to idle and having completed kudos. Just very briefly, I mean, I also wanted to give some updates on 2 related drafts about the key usage limits and this ID update procedure. You can check this in more detail if you want, but basically it's about a procedure for updating sender and recipient IDs in OSCORE. So we submitted a new version in January, and next step is basically to align this with this new spirit of kudos. And we also have the key usage limits, which is about how many times it's safe to use an OSCORE sender or recipient key. This is very much following work done in CFRG about general AAD limits. Next steps, we want to look at simplifications for the state machine. We want to align 2 implementations we have to the new design and process a few remaining issues we still have in the GitHub repo. And any comments and reviews are very welcome. So thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Richard. Just one maybe very quick question or comment, if any, because we're running out of time and still have 1 presentation. Otherwise, please follow on the list. Thank you then.
Thank you.
Carlos. Just 1 second to set up.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. If nobody complains, maybe we can extend this a little bit by a hallway meeting segment, so Carlos has a little bit more time to present things.
Sure.
Hopefully not too much, but I think some of us are interested in hearing this.
Okay, thank you, Carsten. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Carlos Gomez, and I'm going to present 2 drafts which are related. The first one is entitled Co-op over Bundle Protocol. My co-author is Ana Calveras, we're both from UPC. And today I'm presenting revision 03, which addresses some feedback from the last IETF and provides also some more content. So this is the updated table of contents where we have a new section on proxying and a new subsection, which is part of the IANA considerations. And the first update is in the payload length option section. This is folder 3. You may recall in 02, we added a new co-op option, which is this one that indicates the size of the payload of a co-op message, and it's intended to enable message aggregation so that a receiver of an aggregate message is then able to recover the original single messages that are in the aggregate message. And we made some correction in the format, which would be an unsigned integer, and the length, which would be 0 or more bytes. Then the new section on proxying starts by providing some overview of the concept of what is a co-op proxy and what could be the benefits. This is pretty much well known by the core working group, but perhaps not so much in DTN. On the benefits, we explained that the co-op proxy can, among others, serve as a response from a cache in order to reduce response time and network bandwidth or energy consumption, which are benefits that may also be useful in the environments where BP is used, which is pretty much challenged environments. And we illustrate scenarios comprising a proxy between the client and the co-op origin server. The one on top uses co-op to co-op proxy. The second one shows an HTTP to co-op cross proxy. By the way, the topology shown here could match the one that was presented by Marc Blanchet in several working groups, perhaps not in core in Dublin, where the client could be on Earth, the origin server could be, say, on Mars, and the proxy could be in a Mars orbiter. And in section 11, which is entitled Securing Co-op over BP, we have added some additional content. We now explain that BPSec allows to protect all the fields of a co-op message carried over BP. However, in scenarios with co-op proxies, BPSec cannot ensure the protection of application layer data between a co-op client and the co-op origin server. That's because the scope of BPSec would terminate at the proxy or would start at the proxy. And in that case, we state that OSCore should be used to protect application layer data between the two actual co-op endpoints. Also, we have added that in scenarios without co-op proxies, both OSCore or BPSec may be used to provide end-to-end application layer data protection. And then perhaps there's an open question, which is there any reason why both OSCore and BPSec should be used simultaneously in a scenario known to be without proxies? And if the answer is no, then the next question is, okay, maybe which one of those should we use? So any input you may have on this will be much welcome. And we have also added a subsection in the IANA consideration section, which is our request for IANA to add the payload length option to the co-op option numbers registry. And there are other updates. Section 5 discusses the details for the bundle that carries a co-op message. So this is extended on stating which will be the value for the bundle lifetime field. When an aggregate message is carried, this value could be one of three possible options. If the aggregate message only comprises con messages, then the bundle lifetime would be set to exchange lifetime plus max aggregation delay, which is a new parameter that indicates the time since the first single message is generated until the aggregate message is passed to the BP layer for encapsulation. Then the second one is the second possible option is if the aggregate message only comprises non-messages, then the bundle lifetime would be set to non-lifetime plus max aggregation delay. And otherwise, if the aggregate message comprises a combination of con and non-messages, then it would be set to the maximum of exchange lifetime and non-lifetime, which usually should equal exchange lifetime plus max aggregation delay. And finally, in section 7 on observe, we have also now briefly mentioned the conditional attributes draft, since it may save a few messages, since with this now a co-op server may send notifications only when some constraints are fulfilled, and therefore it may reduce the message overhead. So this is regarding the first document. And the second one is entitled Co-op in Space. So here, recall that what we aim to do is to provide guidance on how co-op can be used in spatial environments characterized by long latency and connectivity disruption. This can be encountered in scenarios such as deep space scenarios, but also in LEO satellite-based scenarios, in some of those at least, where there's sparse constellations that may require the satellites to use store and forward operation. And also recall that here the assumption is that co-op is running on top of an IP-based protocol stack. So this is the updated table of contents. There's one new section on proxying, another new section on message aggregation. So the introductory part of the proxying section is pretty much similar to the one of the first draft that I mentioned before. Now, the only difference is that the benefits here are now positioned in terms of the environments which are in scope in this draft. And we illustrate some scenarios. The first one would be without a proxy. There would be communication, end-to-end communication by using co-op between the client and the origin server and there may be IP routers in between. Then there could be a co-op-to-co-op proxy, again, for instance, in, say, a Mars orbiter in the scenario I mentioned before. Recall also that in this document, what we recommend is using co-op over UDP for the target environments. And there is also the option of using an HTTP to co-op proxy. Those of you who have been following the Deep Space Initiative and the formation of the new TIP-TOP working group may have seen that the quick transport layer protocol is like one of the fundamental elements that motivate the reassessment of perhaps using IP for even deep space environments. So it is like, well, we can maybe assume that there may be quick infrastructure in some of the related scenarios, and we might have something like HTTP over quick on the left side of the proxy, but then perhaps we might have co-op over UDP on the right side for more lightweight operation, especially if the co-op origin server is a really constrained device. Then section 8 on message aggregation explains basically that there's the new co-op payload length option, which is defined in the first draft, the co-op over BP. This is an option that allows co-op messages destined to the same endpoint to be aggregated and carried as the payload of a single encapsulating low-layer data unit, which in this case would be a UDP datagram. We also mentioned that an aggregate message is a concatenation of messages that carry the payload length option. And we explained that message aggregation may be compatible with application requirements such as incurring additional aggregation delay, but then this may allow to reduce protocol overhead. So yeah, I guess this is everything I had for both documents. Not sure if there's, well, we're beyond the time, but anyway.
Any questions or comments? Christian.
Just a brief comment. I like what you're doing there with the message aggregation. I'm not sure whether it will work out precisely that way technically, but if it does, it would be a candidate for the orthogonality, transport orthogonality aspects that we had in core class. So like, if this works here, I'm not sure it needs to be restricted to that particular use case. So we might pick that up in core class as well if it works out here.
Yeah, so yes, I understand that message aggregation may work outside of the specific draft where now is being defined. So yes, I agree with that, yeah.
Last one from Karsten. Do you want to elaborate on the mic, Karsten?
Yeah, so I think in a previous discussion I mentioned that in co-op over TCP we have changed the header in order to be able to do this. And well, maybe putting in a payload length is not much different from changing the header, but it does mean you have to do some fishing for that particular option number before you actually can go forward. So I don't know if we can use option number 0 or something like that, but I think it would be nice if you didn't have to pass all the options to find out how long this particular message is and whether further messages are following.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And this second draft is also in the agenda for a TIP-TOP working group meeting, right? On Thursday, I think.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah. So we can get also good feedback there, I hope. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Then thank you, Carlos. And that was the last presentation. There's no other input. I think we can close the session, looks like. Thank you all for participating. Keep up the good work. Enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you. See you around.
Thanks for the notes, Christian. Thanks, Rikard, for the notes.
By the way, Marco, for when you later transfer the notes to the data tracker. Oh. Speak off already.
Yeah, let me just close this.